Constructing your life is about much more than just building a bank account. Each week, join real estate entrepreneur and mindset coach Austin Linney as he interviews guests who are constructing their dream lives and impacting the world around them on a daily basis. If you're an entrepreneur or wanting to start a business, or you just want to hear motivating stories of how others have overcome the odds, you are in the right place. And now for your host, Austin Linney.
Guys, welcome to Construct Your Life. This is Austin Linney here. We've got the pleasure of bringing Mr. Casey Gray in here. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very good.
I appreciate you joining us all the way up from Ottawa. He has got a couple different businesses going on. He's a builder. He's got a podcast, real estate investor, highly recommended. Gentleman who lives his life intentionally, which is what I'm all about. So Casey, you can start where you want to, and you kind of tell our audience about what you do and who you are, and we'll get rolling from there.
Sure. Yeah. I guess a little bit of my background, my main career, if you want to call it that, is construction. I started in construction at a young age. I went through school thinking I was going to become an engineer, and then realized that engineers don't really build things. So at 16, I'm like, oh, there's something called carpentry and apprenticeships. And that kind of kicked off, my high school grades dropped, but my construction grade went up. And from there, I just kind of went into construction because that's what I was good at. Ultimately, no one in my family was really in construction. I just had an knack for it, and always loved building things even when I was a kid. So went into that, worked for somebody for almost 7 years, and went off on my own and kind of been evolving ever since. And my main business at this point is the Conscious Builder, which you mentioned, podcast and YouTube channel, where we're focusing a lot on conscious building, which really is just a state of being aware, right? So the way everything that I focus on now is really education. Yes, we are building and doing renovations, but I see our main role as educating people so that they can make conscious decisions when it comes to building and renovating their homes. And obviously this is more of a lifestyle for myself and my wife. It's, like I said, we've been evolving for quite a few years now.
And that's great. And I love that part about it, because you've made your mission is bigger than the almighty dollar, right? And when you can teach people kind of how to do it and stuff like that. I've cracked open a couple 1900-year-old homes, and it's not easy to find the matching materials or find the sustainability in that product. But basically what you're doing is, I would essence that you're almost romantic about bringing some of these buildings back to life, right? And that's kind of the joy of it.
Yeah, well, so everything, I don't swing the hammer at this point very often anymore. We have a crew, we have an awesome team that does that. So I'm more focused on the education side of things. But what we stand for is really about health, comfort, and efficiency, right? So we all need a healthy, comfortable, and efficient home to live in, I believe. And we know a lot more now than we did even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right? The house that I'm living in right now, I didn't build this home, but it's 20 years old. There's a lot of things that that I know that I was doing when I started to learn at that point. But now I know better, right? And that's the first thing we'll do better if we know better. And sometimes we just don't know because maybe we're not interested in it, right? Most people don't know about how to build a house properly because that's not their interest. I get it, right? That's why there's companies like ours that will be there to help you, right? I don't know a lot about a lot of other things, right? I'm not going to go learn about becoming an esthetician, for example. I'm just not interested in it, right? But there's people out there who will teach you how to do that if that's what you want to do, and you just have to keep going and you find somebody you trust and you learn from them. And coaches and mentors, we were talking about mentors before we came on here, right? So it's about learning from people who do it better. And actually, one analogy I like to use is we're a general contractor, right? If you wanted to boil it down, we're a general contractor. We're just specialized in the type of projects that we do. But when my wife and I got married, I said, I don't plan on getting married again. I don't need to learn how to plan a wedding. I'm not interested in planning a wedding. Let's hire a wedding planner. I looked at the wedding planner as a general contractor for weddings. And I'm like, they've done way more weddings than I'm ever going to do in my life. Let's pull on their knowledge and pay them for their experience. And it ended up being the greatest day of our life. Am I saying that renovations and building a new homes is simple and like a wedding? No, but we make it a lot easier, right? And the process will be a lot smoother.
No, this is perfect. So I thought we were going to wait to get into personal development and leadership. We're not, because that's my favorite topic. I don't even talk real estate most of the time with my mentors or anything. What you're talking about there is on such a bigger level, and it wasn't until I learned this skill, because I am a people networker. It's what I do. I know, I just know that's what I do. I fly around the country. I meet real estate investors, and then I was like, I don't want to look at a spreadsheet. I just can't do it. It's not my personality. So let's drill down on that topic of like staying in your lane, because everybody gets the shiny object syndrome. So when you stay in your lane and you focus on what you do, doesn't it allow yourself as a builder, as what you do as a CEO of your company, to operate at the highest form of who you are? And I think that's what really everybody's looking for.
Yeah, so you're breaking up a little bit there, but from what I understand, you're talking about essentially focusing on what you're good at and finding somebody else to do the rest.
Yes, sir.
Is that the gist of it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so yeah, no, I'm a firm believer in that, and that's a thing, right? It's easy to say, hard to do, right? Especially when money is involved, right? Like as when I started my business over 10 years ago now, you have to do everything, right? That's the only way to get things off the ground, unless you have a ton of money that you've already made somewhere else that you're going to use to invest in your company, as opposed to maybe bootstrapping it, like what most companies do, especially in construction. Right. So most contractors who go out on their own are just really good at what they do. And they say, oh, I can do better than, I can make more money, or I can do a better job than where I'm working right now. So they go off and they start their own business, but then they realize that there's a heck of a lot more to it than just swinging a hammer. Right. There's a whole other world out there that they did not know about, which to some extent I knew about. I was not know the intricacies of it. And I kind of just threw myself into it, but I always knew that I wanted to own my own business. I wanted to kind of be in control. I didn't know why at the time, but I knew that that's the direction I was going, probably because I watched my mom grow her own business when I was younger with my stepdad, and yes, they worked a lot of hours, but they had their freedom to do whatever they wanted. Right. So, to some extent, right. Sometimes we start these businesses and they just end up being prisons. But, if you learn from your mistakes and you stay focused on your purpose, you get beyond those tough times. And eventually, like most people who are successful, everybody's an overnight success, 20 years in the making sort of thing. Right. So, it doesn't happen overnight, and you need to stay focused. And as you grow, then you can start filling in the gaps, right? If you're good, like even after 10 years, we are finally looking for somebody to fill that sales position. Like I've been doing that position, partly because I feel like I've had to do it, right? Because, just being who I am and the types of projects that we're doing. But now what's allowed us to now start looking for that is that we have better systems in place for the business, which I have somebody help me create, which is my brother, Chad, right? So he's been helping us with an engineering background. He's a systems and processes guy. So he's been helping us put these systems and processes in place. And him and I have been troubleshooting and figuring out what works, what doesn't work. And then now we're at a point where, okay, we can actually have somebody fill his position because they don't have to do everything that I was doing before, because we've kind of divided that, right, amongst other people. But it's been a long time in the making.
No, I love it. I feel like this is almost my therapy session a little bit too, because I've had a lot of failures in business, but I think every time that you learn, you're moving forward. And that's what's great is like, you're telling me like, it's been 10 years and we're still, we're still figuring it out. We're still putting it together. And that gives me hope, because isn't it the truth that, let's say you get 15 years in and you're like, oh my God, your company's amazing. Like you must have done it in 6 months. And you're like, no, it's been 15 years. And so I think you get in things and you think it's one way, but the systems are really what sets you up in order to leverage yourself out. And that's what we were talking about before we got on, is kind of so you and your wife could do a little traveling. Why don't you talk about what Casey looked like now, and then what you looked in the first 2 years, kind of like if you had to compare, like if you could go back and tell the second year version of yourself into your company, what would you tell that gentleman?
I have to think back. I don't. That's the thing. So, like, I don't know if I'd give myself advice, because I think part of, like, there's all sorts of advice out there, right? There's no shortage. Like this podcast, this is advice, but I think I wouldn't change anything that I did, although I wouldn't wish some of the things that I had to go through upon anybody. I wouldn't change anything either, because it's made me who I am today, right? So I don't regret anything. I don't wish I didn't experience something. I don't, like I said, I don't wish it on other people necessarily. Like I was in a lawsuit for 4 years, which was not fun. And it was all like we were building a house at the same time, going through a lawsuit, just had a baby. All of this stuff was happening at the same time. I didn't have the right systems and processes in place, right? And I look back on it and I'm like, well, freak, how did I get through that, right? Now we're smarter, we're better, we avoid certain situations. We learned from that, right? But if I didn't go through that, everything I deal with today would probably seem like a bigger deal. Now I've went through all that stuff. I'm like, oh, everything else is a piece of cake, right? So I don't know if I would necessarily give myself different advice. I guess I can, if you want me to paint a picture of who, like back then, like I said, the word is evolved. Like I've just evolved as we've learned through that, right? So when I started, and even 2 years in, I was still swinging the hammer, right? So when I start the business, I hire on a couple friends, because what else do you do when you're in your early 20s and you need help, right? You just say, hey, who can help me? I'll pay you. And you're kind of doing everything. You're doing the sales, you're doing the work on site, you're managing the subcontractors, you're doing all that. And then eventually we got busier. I was doing more and more office work. And then eventually I put on quite a bit of weight because I wasn't swinging the hammer as much, didn't change my eating habits. But then where everything really started to change for us was probably around that 2-year mark, actually, as my wife and I went to a Tony Robbins event. And that completely changed our lives because it changed our thinking. And from there, we were more committed to personal development. And the best investment anybody can make, and you know this at this point, is in yourself, right? I've spent thousands of dollars on personal development and training courses, and way more than I would have spent if I went to university, let's put it that way. Because I didn't go to university. I went the apprenticeship route, right? And became a licensed carpenter. But I spent way more on other education than a lot of people spend in university, just because that's the best investment that I think we can make, that now 10 years later is finally starting to pay, actual money, but it has been paying me through my personal development through all these years.
This is perfect. You transitioned the podcast right to my sweet spot, which is mindset and changing. I myself lost 50 pounds in the last year and a half. And when you went to that first event, was it like they yanked up the curtain and you were like, oh my God, there's this whole other world? And that's the way I felt when I joined my first mastermind. I was like, oh, there's these crazy people that love this stuff, and this is like a mindset thing, and you're changing your group. And I would imagine that was a huge shift in your business, but also more personally, I think, just kind of becoming the best version of yourself.
Oh yeah, for sure. It changed everything. Like if you look at a picture, my wife and I have a picture of us at that event. Like my face, I'm just bigger. Like it was actually 50 pounds, but I ended up losing 50 pounds. I didn't add any more exercise. All I did was change the way I eat. And that was everything. My wife and I quit drinking for 5 years. We've since, we never had a drinking problem or anything like that, but we just said, why we do it? Let's just see if we can do it. It ended up being about 5 years where we just didn't have a drink. And then since then, we have drinks on the weekend here and there now. But everything, we kind of drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, and came back. And we were, verbal diarrhea, trying to push it. Then you realize that you can't push it on people. You have to let people find their own journey. And we did all that, right? But what the biggest takeaway from that was that your environment is way more powerful than your willpower, right? And that environment isn't just an environment like the event that we went to, but it's everyday environment. The people you hang out with, the stuff that you watch if you watch the news, the stuff that you read on the internet, social media, like all of that stuff, the people you surround yourself with, that's all your environment, right? And I used to joke about this. I remember one of the carpenters I learned from, he said, oh, it's not my fault. I'm a product of my environment. And I remember thinking, I was pretty young at that point. I just thought it was funny. But now that's so true. We are all, whether we realize it or not, we're products of our environment. So what we have the power to do is to choose which environment we want to put ourselves in, right? So if you want to become someone or something, you have to put yourself in situations that will force you to become that way, because that's way more easier than just trying to willpower yourself into it. Because if you're pull yourself back into this other environment, I'm sure you can talk about that with your background, right? You're just going to continue down that road because that's the environment and those are the people you're surrounding yourself with, right? Look at the average people you hang out with. What kind of cars do they drive? You're probably driving something similar. What kind of house do you live? You probably live in a similar house, right? Where do you, those are all similarities. And if, when you realize that, you'd be like, oh, okay, well, maybe I need to change something, right? And the choice that you can make at that point is a lot easier to do.
When to piggyback off that topic, when you quit drinking, right? They think it's the stop the drinking that's the hard part. That's not the hard part. It's being around the people that know you as the drunk guy, and they're like, "Whoa, hold on, who the hell do you think you are?" Like, I can't tell you how many messages I get. They're like, "Who the fuck do you think you are now? Like, you're better than us now? Like, screw you." And that's what people don't understand. That takes an internal willpower to remove yourself and step into a different environment. And when I got into M1 and then I met people like Matty A and like, all these guys, and they just don't give you an inch, right? And they're like, hey, that doesn't fly with me. Sorry, the BS doesn't work here. And they don't let you slide. And you have it. Like water finds its level. You don't have a choice but to step up your game, and you just constantly like are evolving. And I think that's what we're looking for, because we don't, like, I look at these 21-year-olds, and I'm sure you do now because you were young when you started your business. I look at them and I go, guys, you have like 65 years. Like, it's a long time, right? Like, you don't have to know today. I read a report the other day that the new generation will be in 18 careers before they die. 18 careers.
Oh, really?
That is ridiculous. So, like,
I'm going to stop hiring the young guys.
But what I'm saying is, like, everybody, I do a rant on this. Everybody lives in absolutes, right? But you can't. You have to show up every day and live in your core values and who you are. And so when you started diving into the Tony Robbins and you started I would imagine that you met some great people at the event. I would imagine that the environment that you're speaking of changed. And that just, it was an entire life switch, right? And then so you start peeling back the onion you start losing the weight, right? And you start peeling back the onion, the mindset gets better. How do you keep the mindset so clear? And I'm not saying it's like this every day, but growing a business, having a baby, being married, like, how do you keep all that? What do you tell yourself on a daily basis? Do you stick to a ritual, a morning routine? Like, what is your kind of game plan?
Yeah. Well, I try to create those habits that are beneficial, right? You mentioned that before you hit record, I think, where, I think somebody had told you we all have 5 main habits, right? So be conscious of those habits. But I've kind of, like, my routine changed a little bit, but for the most part, there's been a lot of things that continue to support me along the way. But number one is by far my wife, right? I always say behind every great man is a greater woman. I firmly believe in that. My wife and I have been together, I was 19, so 15, going on 16 years at this point. I was 19 when we met, and we've kind of been, we've been through our ups and downs as a relationship too, right? But I know that, and she knows too, that we're a team. We're working together. She makes me a better person, although it drives me nuts sometimes in the way that she does it, which we've had conversations about. I know that she wants the best for everyone, and she knows that I want the best, and I'm working my butt off to give her the best and our son the best, and so forth, right? So I think having that support, number one, is top priority. Doing it without, like, I've heard of people, I've seen people, met people who weren't in healthy relationships. I can't imagine just having that added stress on top of everything else that's happening, or that happens when you're trying to grow a business and so forth, right? So that's probably the hardest thing if you're in a bad relationship to fix it. Probably the hardest thing, but the number one thing I think anybody would need to figure out first, because your career is not going to excel if your relationship is, in the dumps. And because when your career doesn't go as well, right, you need somebody there to support you, to not necessarily pick you up, but to remind you of who you are and what you're out there and what you're out there to do and what you're capable of doing. So I think that's number one. But beyond that, I guess habits and rituals that I've done, like I've started meditating probably around the Tony Robbins event time regularly. So that's been a huge help. It's kind of like the best analogy I would have heard is like if you think of your mind of like a lake, right? And every thought is a ripple or a wave. Meditation smooths out that water so that you can see the bottom, right? So that to me, when I do that, I function better, I think better, I communicate better, I sleep better. All that's one tool that I can continuously fall back on. Another quote that's always stuck with me. I don't remember where I heard it, but it's men's problems stem from the fact that they're unable to sit in a dark room quietly for an extended period of time. Something along those lines, right? Which I also believe in, because try to sit with your thoughts with nothing else happening and see what happens, right? And the meditation is that practice of not necessarily getting rid of thinking, because that's what our mind's designed to do. It's to think. It's to realize that we are not our thoughts, right? The thoughts that we have, I guarantee you and I have had the same thoughts millions of times before, right? And that goes for everybody around the world. Like it's the same thoughts. People get anxious and scared and fearful and sad about the same things for the most part. They might be living somewhere different or dealing with something different, but it's usually comes down to the same thing. And Tony Robbins talks a lot about that too. So meditation has been a huge help. Writing has been a huge help. I did over a year, like I wrote a daily blog. So I did over 400 blog posts, never missed a day. That was actually quite, I guess, therapeutic. I did that last year. I basically started January, I think 2018, and I went through till February 2019 to 2020. And that was actually really helpful, right? So just writing a journal. And these aren't things, so they kind of come and go, right? Those types of things. And then obviously being a part of M1. So I'm really conscious of the people that I have in my circle and the people that I'm kind of bad at like staying in touch with people, but I kind of force myself and I get myself into these groups where, I'm forced to. I was on a pod call this morning, right? So I'm keeping those lines of communication up. But all the greatest things that have happened in my career, in my life, typically have not come because they were planned. It's because I was just out there making things happen, taking action, meeting people, and then the opportunities came up.
That is the truest statement in the world. And that's the truth. I mean, yeah, every time I've planned on something, it hasn't worked out the way I thought it was going to work out. And then you do something. It's a true story. I did a speech. So I Airbnb for 5 years. I've done it all around the country. I did a speech like a year and a half ago, and I got an email yesterday. And she's like, I need you to talk to like all these people. And I'm like, what? That was like a year and a half ago. I barely remember. And she was like, no, you crushed it. And I'm like, but you just don't know. You just have to go out. And that's what I like. The podcast for me is something I've always dreamed about because it's like my own little mastermind. I love helping people, but I have to remove myself from the ego part of it, right? Because you're like, how many people are listening and everything. It's not about that. It's just about, you can't control when somebody hears the message. My buddy, is in Colorado. He's a coach. He said something great. He said the ego is trying to get done what the soul is here to do. And he said that's where people get messed up is they lead with ego when your true soul, your definition of who you are is so much greater than that. And I think that I can tell by just talking to you right now that your embodiment of who you are and what you represent runs through your company. And I would imagine that is why, people do want to work with you. I would imagine that you are your brand, right? And your podcast and everything. And you have a lot going on. I mean, that's an understatement. But when you get in moments where you're like, why am I doing the podcast? Why do I have this business? I just want to travel. What do you tell yourself? Like, what is your bigger why to kind of keep it going? Because some days some days I'll have like a little bitch section about myself, like you're not doing enough and everything. And then I remember my favorite quote is, nobody cares, work harder. And what do you tell yourself in those moments when you're just not feeling it, right? But you need to step into it no matter what, because you're the CEO, right? And that's what I have to deal with, because I have people that work for me.
Mm-hmm. I don't think it's so much about what do I tell myself, but what do I self? Right. So meaning that usually when you're down or you're starting to feel stressed or overwhelmed or whatever it is, it's your mind that's then telling you that you're not doing enough, or they're not doing you did this wrong, you did that wrong, or whatever it may be. It's usually not that I need to tell myself something. It's that I need to stop telling myself something. And that's where the meditation would come in, right? I need to clear my mind, get those thoughts out, and then reconnect with what I ultimately know is my purpose and why I've started this, right? And as cheesy as it is, it's never about the destination, right? You've heard that. It's not the destination, it's the journey. It's like, this is the cheesiest thing ever. You've heard it a million times, but if you really think about it, it's true, right? There never is a destination, because once, especially for people who are out there and go-getters and they want to accomplish and do things, is that you're never done. You're just always moving towards the next target, and it's about who we become along the way. And in those moments when I do get stressed out, or I'm thinking about something that really shouldn't be bothering me, I guess one of the things I do remind myself of, which usually only comes after I quiet my mind, is that, hey, I'm human. I am just another human being having a human experience, and I'm stressed out. Maybe I ate some crappy food and now it's bothering me, or maybe it's like you were saying, it's 115 degrees outside and that's bothering me. It's just always learning about what works and what doesn't work, and it's different for everybody. So what works for me isn't going to work for you, and vice versa. One thing that's helped me recently is I started to learn some about the Vedic lifestyles. So understanding like doshas and that sort of stuff. And there's 3 doshas. And one of them, the pitta, which I am, is the fire, right? And they don't like heat, right? You shouldn't be eating like spicy food. So I'm like, that's all this stuff. It's like, I love spicy food, but that actually makes me more irritable, right? Because it's kind of like balancing, right? So I was always of the mind that, there's no such thing as balance. Balance is baloney. Life is never balanced. It's more like a teeter-totter, yada, yada, yada. But in the sense of balancing your personality, this actually helped me a lot. And it was, actually, I'm going to show this book.
Dude, you're tapping me into a whole new world I didn't know about.
So check out this book. I can send you one, actually.
Yeah.
We got a bunch here. So The Business Casual Yogi by Vish. I had him on our podcast and our live. That he is just such a great teacher, because he kind of simplifies everything and he tells good stories, and he's his background is business. And then he found this stuff as well. And now he's helping other people because he has that, like, he was a go-getter, made people cry in the office. Like, he was hardcore type A personality, like business personality, right? And realized that, okay, it's not working. And so reading this I'm like, okay, there's once again, it's just more tools in the toolbox, right? It just helped me understand myself more, but reminds me that, hey, I don't have it all figured out yet. I probably will never have it figured out. And it's just always going to be learning and growing, right? I'm not perfect. Even in my business, our core values are fun, mastery, and honor. And fun meaning like not everything is fun, but fun can be brought into everything. Honor is just honor yourself, honor the people you work with, honor the environment. Another word would be a respect. And then mastery to me is kind of more what life is about, because it's not about perfection. Tony Robbins has said this too, right? It's, perfection is the lowest standard you can set for yourself because it's not possible. But for myself, it's more about mastery. I never expect my team to be perfect. I expect mistakes to happen. I just don't want the same mistakes to happen again, right? So if you make a mistake, okay, great, I'm fine with that. Just don't do it again. Just learn from it and move on, right? And continue moving forward. And I think that's what life is about, right? I don't regret anything that I've done in the past. And I know I'm going to make more mistakes in the future, but I'm going to continue to learn, and I'm just going to continue growing and evolving.
No, man. I'm so excited to read that book because I'm a fire sign too. So, and I love spicy food. So this might be an issue because I get irritable. So this is great. Uh, but I'm tapping into more of the spiritual side over the last 4 months, and it's really been an interesting journey because you realize how much your subconscious and your conscious is playing against you at all times, because you're 100% right. It's all in the mind. I mean, when you can tap into the parts of you and keep a steady, I mean, I think that, like, I told myself 3 years ago that I won't get sick, and like I just beat it with optimism. Like, even if I get sick for like a day and like it just goes away. But I switched back to vegetarian like 2 weeks ago because I just loved it so much the way I felt. And I don't think people pay attention to the things they're putting in their body, meaning, like you said, the environment, the food, the talk, right? And so, like 4 months ago, I turned off the news. Like, it's not worth it. You could turn it on now. It's the same thing they're saying in March. It's not going to change.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's not
going
to
to miss anything. Don't worry.
No, you're not going to miss a thing. Right. And so you're choosing how you operate in this world. And when you're 100% right, because you're never, that's the whole thing. Is every time Matty A has one of my favorite sayings. It says, make your ceiling your new floor. Like, you're never going to get to where you're going because there's always going to be somewhere else to get, right? And all the time. And so as you dive deeper and as you grow as a business owner and you're moving forward and you're doing, I find that I'm talking to you, I see you light up when it comes to, like, the business is a vehicle and you love it. It's your baby. But I find that I can tell that you get a lot of joy in this other stuff, and that's just growing as a person. Is, in your opinion, and that's all it is do you view that by digging into personal development, what you eat, working out and everything, is that truly where, if you were somebody looking to get started, right, they're trying to change their life, is that where you would drill down on and kind of hone there to be the best CEO or employee that you want to be, and that's going to permeate in the rest of your life?
Yeah. So I think the number one thing you need to do is to realize that you're number one, meaning that if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to take care of other people. Right. I'm writing about this actually in a book that I'm doing with Kevin Harrington, one of the sharks from the Shark Tank. And I wrote a chapter on that, and realizing that if you don't take care of yourself, your health, your mental state, whatever it may be, everything else is going to follow that. Business, like life, is 80% psychology and 20% mechanics. You can learn how to work a spreadsheet. You can learn how to do your financials. You can learn how to swing a hammer. You can learn how to design a website. You can learn all the mechanical stuff. But if your psychology is not there and a pandemic hits, you're in big trouble. When the pandemic hit for me, I was actually I'm getting goosebumps because I was in a really good state. Those first 3 months were probably some of the greatest 3 months of my life, because what it allowed me to do was focus on the business, right? I was able to work on the business instead of in the business, because, like, I had a few businesses on the go. They all basically went to zero for revenue, but we were able to get through that. And, like, things are skyrocketing now, especially on the construction side. But it was some of the best times of my life, because I was able to focus on things that I wanted to work on, that with the growth stuff, the creative stuff. And I was, part of me, although I don't wish, bad things to happen to anybody, obviously, but part of me was waiting for something like this so that I could take advantage of the opportunities that would inevitably come from this situation. Right. So some of the greatest businesses are made during times like this, right? Because if you can thrive and survive in a time like this, when things are good, you're going to be flying, right? But you always have to remember that it's going to happen again, right? Nobody could have predicted the pandemic, but we know that something is going to happen, right? It always does. It's a roller coaster. There's always an up and there's always a down, and it just continues to go. So you just have to continue to prepare yourself, take advantage of the season that you're in and learn from it and grow, and just prepare yourself for the next season ultimately. So by working on yourself, and I think I love business a lot because business has forced me to become a better person, right? It's forced me to work on myself because I've realized that if I didn't work on myself, my business was going to fail. And if my business fails, then I'm not only letting myself down and my family down, but I'm also letting down all the people that were relying on me. Subcontractors, employees, homeowners, whoever, everybody who was relying on that business is now being let down. So that is pressure that I guess thrive on to some extent, because that's how I've kind of set myself up. If I put things in place where it forces me to step up, well, then I have to, because I know that I'm not going to step down.
I love the season analogy, because I truly believe that, where there's like times where I want to push the pedal to the max. And then there's times I have let's say self-diagnosed manic personality, where I'm like 90 to nothing, or there's nothing. Like when I go to Europe, we went to Europe for 2 months. Like I'm a different human. Like it's off, the switch is off. I'm taking naps. I'm like, who's this person? But I think that you have I think that you have to know yourself and know what season you're in. And you're basically, what I call it is, I hacked myself. Like my team has a thing of Airtables where they're like, dude, stop texting me, just like drop it in here and it goes to a spreadsheet. But like I have to be self-aware enough to know that I need that, right? And I think self-awareness is everything, and you play to your strengths. You know, you can look at it any way you want. You can work on your weaknesses or play to your strengths. I choose to play to my strengths and just keep pushing forward. And that's why, like, I try to learn multifamily, and I know enough to be dangerous, but like, I'm not going to pour over spreadsheets. Like, that's what Phil Capron's for. You know, I don't need to do all that stuff, you know, but I think that's very important to somebody, is that don't sit and dwell in the negative of who you're not, but push forward who you are. And I think that you've highlighted that in your businesses and who you are, and it comes across on the table. And I would imagine that was a big, like, you have moments of like self-reflection that are deep, that to get you there, right?
Oh, for sure. Right. And I think that's a good point of working on strengths too, is that if you work on your weaknesses, you're just going to have stronger weaknesses. So what's the point? Right. So you might as well work on your strengths and find somebody else that has your weaknesses as strengths. And
that's in a partner, meaning for life, and that's in a girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, that's in a business partner and everything. And it wasn't until I surrounded myself with the right people around me that I was able to soar. And that's so important. And, you know, do you have a business partner in the business, or are you the CEO?
Yeah. So I am the CEO, but my brother has since, he didn't found it with me, but he's since come on to help. So I've 4 brothers and 2 sisters, but my brother, Chad, is one of the partners in the business now. So he's the COO. He's kind of more on the operations side. Like I said, he's the engineer. He's definitely more like, I'm more like, let's just get this thing going. And I'm not kind of off to the races. He's like, all right, how do we make it better now? Which is perfect, because that's not what I do, right? I just want to get it going, and then I want to pass it off, and then I want to start the next thing. So I'm more of like looking at the bigger picture. He's looking at the nitty gritty mechanical stuff of how everything's working and making sure it's running smoothly.
Am I the only one that has seen a trend where engineers are stepping into the real estate space like crazy? I mean, I feel like it's just engineer city, like all of a sudden. In real estate, investing in business and multifamily and stuff like that. So when you're not running the company, doing the podcast, being a dad, all that stuff, what do y'all like to do for fun? What kind of gives you the recharge that you're looking for in your life to kind of reset? What does that look like for y'all?
Yeah, well, anything to do with outside, really. Like even my wife and son and I just took a week off, and we went up to Mont Tremblant, which is a couple hours here, and just kind of took advantage of everything they had there. It was all outdoor stuff. So like mountain biking, kayaking, going to the beach, hiking up the hill, down the mountain. Just did a whole bunch. Our little guy's almost turned 7 this weekend. So some of the stuff that we do, you know, we have to do for him, right? So we're at that. But my wife and I will be going on a little trip ourselves. We always do that as well. But I have a 77 Westphalia, which is right now being restored. But other than this year, I would usually take that, go camping, kind of get out away from the computer screens and the go of ultimately what business and life has become like, right? So to kind of recharge, I I like doing adventurous things. I haven't done as much, everything, the pandemic put a little bit of a stop on that. So like skydiving, bungee, those are all things that I like to do. I just like trying new things, right? But it's typically something that's like outdoors.
So I'm asking for myself because I think you could help me with this. When did you get to a point, because I could tell you're a type A, when did you get to a point that you allowed yourself to take that time off and actually take it? Meaning you weren't fretting about the business, or maybe you still do. I don't know. I'm just asking because that's what I'm working on right now is the number one thing is like understanding that like maybe it's okay to take a full day off and not focus on business.
Yeah. I think I'm still working on that myself. I don't stress about it. The biggest thing, like when I was away, for example, I didn't check my email. So that was one thing. I told my team, I said, you can get a hold of me, but I'm not checking my email. So I did take care of some messages that came in through Slack and stuff like that, just to make sure things were going along, because I hate to be the bottleneck. I want to make sure people have what they need to continue, right? So my goal right now is to make sure that the company is continuing to grow and operate without me. To some extent, it still needs me. Like I said, on the sales, we're fixing that position. But where I'm kind of transitioning, whereas I'm not necessarily there for the customers as much as I am there for the team, right? To support them so that they can support the customers. So to me, that's not like it's not stressful, right? I don't mind checking my message. I actually kind of feel better about waking up, taking care of a couple things, whether it's work or personal, just something. I feel like I need to check something off my list. That just makes me feel better, right? So it's harder for me to just go somewhere and just completely shut off, because usually I have done it before, but it takes a few days by the time you finally realize, okay, I can leave that, which I think is good and we all need it. But right now where I'm at, I've realized is that doing a little bit in the morning or just checking some things off my list clears my head so that I can then be present with whoever I'm with, whether it's myself or my wife or my son.
You're not going to believe this. We were on a 7-mile hike yesterday. I said the exact same thing. I said, I refuse to be the bottleneck from people working. I can't do it. Like if that's me holding up the thing, that's never going to happen. And I was holding it up with something that I needed from my assistant, and it just was driving me, like I couldn't get it off my mind. Right. Like I can't, and like we're in this beautiful forest, and you're just like, I can't, he's sitting there. I could picture him at his keyboard, like ready to work. And I'm like, oh God, but that is the truth. But that is being better about your systems. Right. And just getting constantly going. So how do people find out about your company? How do they find out about the podcast, all that kind of stuff like that? How do they track you down?
Yeah, easiest thing is probably just go to my personal website. Everything's there, just caseygray.com. So CASEYGREY.com. You can also head to theconsciousbuilder.com. But if you go to my personal site, kind of that'll link to the Conscious Builder, and then the Conscious Builder will link to our YouTube channel and our podcast and everything else that we have going on.
Well, dude, I appreciate you so much for coming on, man. And I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Austin. Appreciate it. Got it, guys. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you share it to your friends, send it around, guys. And we just really appreciate you. And y'all have a great day, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Construct Your Life with Austin Linney. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with a friend. Most importantly, take this opportunity to start constructing your life by taking immediate action on what you learned. For show notes, resources, and more information on one-on-one coaching with Austin, visit constructyourlifepodcast.com.